Without truth, there can be no justice.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, have you reached a verdict?
We have, Your Honor.
Speak out. Ask those questions. Demand that truth.
Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 32 of Truth is Justice. The argument raised by a few people during the week for why Bob was justified in not drawing attention to the fact that many of the IT-related questions and the identity of unknown female DNA number 1 contributor could be easily answered has been predictable. But it's fundamentally flawed. Deeply fundamentally flawed. The general approach taken from those defending Bob has been to reflect on the fact that the matter, referring to Sandra's appeal, is currently active, and that accordingly, gaining access to the IT material, for example, would not be possible. And that argument is manifestly false. I've highlighted numerous times how it would be undoubtedly negative for the defence to confirm that Liz was unknown female number 1, and undoubtedly negative for the defence to support or encourage a further review of the disk images from the Gateway laptop. The reason for the unknown female number 1, from the defence perspective, is pretty straightforward. It's better for Sandra to have a complete unknown female DNA profile in the house, especially because she draws attention to a female being present in the home that evening. It's a flimsy argument and didn't count for much, especially when you read the way that Ms. Barnett at trial demonstrated it was all but certain that Liz was unknown female number 1. But despite being flimsy and easily counted, it's better for the defence to have an unknown rather than a known that would almost certainly be Liz. And for the IT matter, there are slightly more complex reasons for why the defence wouldn't want to have that laptop analysed again, or at least why they wouldn't support a request to have it analysed again. The first reason is Mr. Devlin. He doesn't come out of any of this well, but at least as far as the Seacrests go, they can claim that he misled them too. Analyse the disk image again and discover that his trial testimony was not accurate, and you have a serious situation of a key defence expert witness misrepresenting his findings. Additionally, Mr. Devlin's behaviour since, including claims supposedly made by him that he didn't write some emails to me, and you have a key defence expert witness who is dishonest. Not a good look for any counsel. Secondly, drawing attention to the findings in Mr. Devlin's forensic IT report will likely raise significant concerns about every one of his findings in that report and his trial testimony. How could any of his findings be taken at face value if one of them is found to be wrong? Far better to do anything and everything to deflect attention away from that report and the findings, including the defence counsel using Liz to publicly attempt to silence these claims by allowing her to publish text messages between Sandra's defence attorney, Miss Alison Seacrest, and the defence expert witness, Mr. Devlin. Aside from representing pretty poor form on the part of the defence counsel to use the daughter of your client in that way, have you ever thought about how it's strange that the Seacrests claim that Mr. Devlin cannot, or is not willing to, comment formally on this matter, but he is happy for his text messages sent to defence counsel to be shared? It seems highly unusual to me. I mean, Ms. Seacrest wouldn't have allowed Liz to publish those texts between her and Mr. Devlin without first checking that Mr. Devlin was happy for her to do so. Or would she? I don't know. But it is bizarre. So those arguments about why, for the defence, it would make no sense to address the unknown female DNA number 1 and to expose their key expert witness, Mr. Devlin, those arguments have nothing, absolutely zero to do with explaining why Bob wouldn't ask the questions and push for answers. At least, it makes zero sense if you took Bob at his word that this whole season for him was about justice for Jim. It doesn't prevent Liz comparing her DNA to that detailed in the amended DNA report. Gosh, if Liz didn't want to do it, Bob wouldn't even need to stake out her house and rummage through her trash. They are around each other on occasion, where getting a sample of her DNA would be simple. That unknown female DNA number 1 could be resolved one way or the other very quickly. And as for the IT matters, Bob could gain access to the disk images of the Gateway laptop and or the laptop itself. It would only require Sandra directing her defence counsel to give Bob the disk images held by Mr. Devlin. And remember, Sandra is the client. They work for her. If she wanted that information shared and the questions answered, it would be shared and the questions would be answered. Another way would be for Sandra asking Liz to collect the laptop from Harris County and providing it to Bob, or a forensic IT professional of Bob's choosing. And if Sandra didn't want to do that, Liz could ask her to, on the grounds of wanting answers about what happened to her father. If Sandra refused, that would perhaps raise some questions. Now, Bob didn't address this in any way, and rightly so, I suppose. The commercial reality probably is that his show is more entertaining if his audience feel that they are working towards justice for the victim, and not just being, the public relations arm of the defence counsel. But in reality, that is essentially all the show from Bob is, a PR campaign of sorts for the convicted. Now think about this. Try and recall a single matter that Bob has raised and dived into genuinely that represents a negative for Sandra in what he found. I can't recall a single one. What we see instead is a focus on each of the defence points that Bob views as fertile ground, and an almost complete absence of true investigation into the things that would provide answers, but not the ones that Sandra wants spoken. And that leads us to the topic of today's episode, the post office visit. We are Truth is Justice, and we are setting the record straight. There is something intriguing about the timeline of events during the day on the 22nd of December 2012. Some attention has been paid to those events, but I think, as you'll see, and as has been the case with some other things, the attention hasn't been paid to the right things, or at least some have chosen to disregard certain aspects of Sandra's narrative that are at best very difficult to explain. A member of our group raised a lot of this material with me, and a big thank you to them for doing that. I'm referring to the narrative Sandra told detectives regarding her and Jim's activities on the afternoon leading up to Jim's murder. You'll recall how, during her police interview, Detective Doucet basically asked her what she and Jim were doing throughout the day, and Sandra provides an account of it through his series of questions. This line of dialogue starts with Sandra waking up at noon. Sandra then goes on to describe various errands that she and Jim ostensibly ran together that afternoon, with stops at a liquor store, which is Texans Liquor, and the grocery store, Kroger. You'll see in Sandra's interview that Detective Doucet then goes on to ask her, "And where else did you go?" To which Sandra responds, "That's it." And what I'm here to tell you is that Sandra either forgot to mention another stop we know that she made immediately prior to the stop at the liquor store, or that she deliberately excluded this information for reasons which are unknown. And to elaborate, consider these points. A receipt photographed on the bed amongst the contents of Sandra's purse depicts a timestamp for a transaction at the Fairbanks post office at 2:52 p.m, 2:52 and 25 seconds to be exact. The transaction was paid for via a Discover card and was for mailing a parcel to Camp Hill, Pennsylvania, zip code 17069. The address of the post office is 7050 Brook Hollow West Drive, Houston. 10 minutes and 24 seconds after the timestamp of the post office transaction, a receipt rolls off the printer at Texans Liquor at 3:02 p.m. The Fairbanks post office and Texans Liquor are approximately 2.6 miles apart from one another. I'll put up a map on the show notes relevant to the episode on our website depicting their respective locations. Now, while looking at the map, consider that a member of ours actually did this drive and timed it. In fact, they reenacted the whole process. From leaving the post office to walking to the car to driving to the liquor store, parking and then entering the liquor store, the route between these two locations comprises a total of 4 traffic lights. First, note that Sandra makes zero mention of her visit to the post office that day. And one could ask the legitimate question, why? During this same interview, she was lucid enough to describe exactly what each of them ate for dinner, how they were dressed, etc., but she couldn't remember this fairly significant errand, even when queried by Detective Doucet as to where else did you go. So was Sandra intentionally leaving that out? To me, that seems very possible. And second, note that Sandra seems to go out of her way during the interview by saying to Detective Doucet that it was only she that went into the liquor store, as if she was anticipating them going to look at the video, which you'll see from the relevant incident reports that the detective subsequently did. Again, why would Sandra make absolutely no mention of the post office? Was she, in reality, doing those errands alone or with someone else other than Jim? Note that in her interview, Sandra specifically acknowledges that her and Jim were together. Third, now let's look at the problem of timing. Even though the post office and Texans Liquor are only 2.6 miles away, the time between the two timestamp receipts is only that 10 minutes and 24 seconds. Imagine performing this process from start to completion. The post office clerk hands you the receipt and you walk out of the building to wherever you parked your car. From there you get in, back out, leave the parking lot and drive the 2.6 miles. Now, traffic shouldn't be too much of an issue, but remember you have the 4 traffic lights to go through. So you're bound to hit, you'd imagine, at least a couple of them and perhaps all 4, and that'll consume up to a few minutes. Upon arrival at the Texans Liquor, you park the car, you get out and you enter the store. Now, bourbon-infused eggnog, which is what was purchased, is kind of a specialty drink, so who knows how long it would take to find it. I've been told that the liquor store isn't that large, but I'd still imagine that it would take someone, at least several minutes in there looking around for that specific item. And then, what if someone else was at the counter? Or what if the clerk was attending to something else in the store? In Sandra's case, however, the total time to go from receipt at the post office to the receipt at Texans Liquor again is only 10 minutes and 24 seconds. Now consider Sandra's claimed medical issues. Even though it is claimed that she was likely having a good day, we're talking an exceptionally quick journey, an exceptionally quick walk through the store. It's my view that the likelihood of this happening in such a condensed time frame is very small. So, to our member who actually performed this experiment, physically retracing this entire trip exactly as Sandra would have done it that day, they set a stopwatch as they walked away from the postal counter and crossed the threshold of the liquor store exactly 9 minutes and 25 seconds later, which would leave exactly 59 seconds to find the bourbon-infused eggnog and actually complete the transaction at the counter. The person encountered partial cycles of 2 out of the 4 traffic lights getting there, and they walked at their own personal pace. I can say, with a reasonably high level of confidence, that the person's walking speed is considerably quicker than Sandra's, even on a good day for Sandra. So would this timing be impossible? No. But would it be improbable? Absolutely. So if this wasn't Sandra, who was it? Could Jim have run the post office errand using the Discover card and then, for some reason, gave Sandra the receipt? Who knows? But again, that seems unlikely, because remember where the receipt was found, with Sandra's items on the bed. So, for me, most intriguing is simply the fact that Sandra didn't mention the post office errand to begin with. You'll note, during the line of questioning by Detective Doucet during her interview, Sandra talks about going to Kroger and the liquor store. If you get a chance to look at the maps, please do, and observe on the maps that the Kroger shopping centre is directly north across the road, a busy 4-lane divided road, from Texans Liquor. Having come from the post office, which is to the south, then turning west onto the road leading to Texans Liquor, it would have made far more sense to make a right turn into the Kroger parking lot and do that errand first. The reason being, doing it that way avoids having to cross that busy divided road twice. In other words, if they came from the post office and went to Texans Liquor, then Kroger, it would have required them to cross the busy road twice if they in fact went home after Kroger, based on where the Melgar residence is, which is to the east. You'll see what I mean if you look at the map. And here's why I bring this up. Whereas the post office Texan Liquor errand was not impossible, for reasons highlighted it was highly improbable, but adding a Kroger stop in between the post office and Texan Liquor, however, which for the reasons I've highlighted would have been the most logical flow, would then very much make the timeline of 10 plus minutes more or less impossible. And a few more points on this. About the Saturday errands preceding the murder, note that Sandra may have felt compelled to tell the detectives that she was doing those errands with Jim, because earlier in the interview she'd already told Detective Doucet that she wasn't driving by herself anymore due to her seizures. And we of course know that this was one of many lies, as we've heard from her own neighbour and the defence witness, Mr. Scott Lacey, testimony where he flat out states that he saw Sandra driving herself all the time. I emphasise this point to underscore the reason behind Sandra mentioning to Detective Doucet that it was her that went into the liquor store and not Jim. Now to sum up, I don't know exactly what all of this means, but it's most definitely intriguing. And to me, it demonstrates another instance of where the investigation by Bob and his team was determined from the very start to not be problematic for Sandra. How can you possibly view the material distributed by Bob as authentic, objective, and unbiased when it is handled in that entirely defence-leaning way? Once again, Jim was let down by Bob, but we hope our efforts here at Truth is Justice go some way to balancing that and setting the record straight. Thank you for listening, and we look forward to you joining us next week at Truth is Justice.
Thank you.